I wanted to talk about two perspectives that we tend to have. You ask most people, and they'll be able to place themselves on the spectrum between these two perspectives. And these perspectives are cynicism and optimism. So you're likely to, place yourself, as either a cynic or an optimist or somewhere in between. They're labels that we use all the time. And so, I wanted to talk a bit about them.
Glass half full, half empty kind of thing.
Yeah. These are pretty perennial and constant things in our lives. So let's talk about them. And
so it seems to me it's kind of like the general approach on how you look at life and how it kind of, when life happens to you, how do you respond to it?
Yeah. And a thought that I had is that, with any perspective, you have blind spots, right? And so what are the blind spots of being a cynic, and what are the blind spots of being an optimist? And what pitfalls does that do those perspectives lead us to?
Yeah, I definitely think optimism definitely kind of blinds you to reality, which is probably the most obvious thing that stands out to me. Is optimists tend to just be like, oh no, the best thing's gonna happen and it's all gonna be okay, when sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes shit's gonna hit the fan and your life's not gonna be the same ever again, type of thing. And I think that's a huge blind spot of just like strict optimists, is that they tend to just ignore reality almost. But maybe the cynics are doing that too, just they're ignoring that things can be good.
Right. Yeah. Tyler, do you have anything to say?
As I like to do a lot, I like to take in, when I ask philosophical questions, I especially like in this case where it's a personality, I like thinking of the people I know and trying to just like frame the question first, or in like who I know and where they would kind of lie on the spectrum. And I'm still trying to processing that. And a couple, I'm trying to think of like can anyone fall on the spectrum? And I'm assuming the middle is neither, or is it a little bit of both? And the reason why is because I know like a couple people who are very positive, but I don't mean positive in terms of optimism. I just mean they're very positive people. They always reflect an outwardly good mood. They are always congratulatory, and my immediate thing was, if you're having those like outward feelings, that you would be a optimist. But I've realized that just because this person is reflecting these like positive vibes, that I actually don't know whether they're an optimist or a cynic. There's no way for me to actually know, which is just a weird observation for me, because at least when these words come up, what I generally hear is that if you're someone who has a positive view, you're likely an optimist. But you could also be like someone who doesn't show, like, whether it's they have their cynic side, which might be caused because of mental illness. They just might be a cynic who likes putting out positive vibes, like for example, like if you're someone like a Robin Williams, generally you see his positivity everywhere, but internally very cynical, because that was a cause of his mental illness, which is just kind of interesting for me to realize, whereby that optimism and cynics is usually an internal feeling, and you don't actually know what other people are.
Yeah, and you don't necessarily externalize it the same way. Like, whether a cynic might be very positive or whatever, they're not going to externalize everything the same way.
So there seems to be an outward positivity and negativity, and an inward cynicism and optimism.
Yeah, it seems to me like that. That's kind of the case. But I'm kind of curious. So, like, what if someone kind of abstains from this, being like nihilists who just think that nothing matters and there's no reason to be optimistic or cynical?
And
Is that not cynicism?
Is it though, or is it like a lack of being cynical? Because nihilists are literally like nothing matters.
and that's why I said earlier, like, is the middle that you're a bit of both, or are you neither? Because I generally, if you get to know me, I have a very indifferent personality. It's like I'm not really expecting a positive outcome, and I'm not expecting a negative outcome to any situation. I'm very, well, that outcome happened. Okay.
So I'd almost argue that the mid ground would kind of be neither, because it seems to me the more optimistic you get, the less cynical you get. So as you go towards cynicism, you're going to reduce both of those things, right? Until you reach zero. Kind of like an upside down pyramid if you're looking at it at a graph, right?
Right.
And then
That's
so the
interesting.
intersection would be nihilists.
I wonder if there's if you can make a diamond. So you have a positive pyramid stacked on top of well, did I just say positive pyramid? Whatever. Positive pyramid and negative pyramid. Yeah. Where, if you're in the middle of the positive pyramid, then you're able to wield both in the right circumstances. Because one of my questions is like, these are perspectives where they're blind spots. Like they must have blind spots. And so if you're someone who is aware of the blind spots of cynicism and as well as the blind spots of optimism, and then you can navigate your way around them and wield the benefits of both perspectives.
Is realism a thing? Because that might be something. Like if you wait, what is that? Pragmatism? Maybe that would be something like that, because they kind of weigh both the options, but they do kind of have the added benefit, unlike nihilists, of, thinking that things matter.
I feel like cynicism and optimism runs kind of deep. Maybe it'd be useful for us to talk about what we mean about these terms. Mm-hmm. But the space that they occupy for me is like an immediate intuition. It's sort of like a reaction. Like, oh, here's a new idea. It's probably not going to work. That was a cynical view. Where are the holes? Where have they messed up the assumptions? Whereas an optimistic view might be like, oh, this is a pretty idea. This is cool. How can we develop it? How could we make it work? The blind spot for the optimist is not noticing the bad assumptions, and the cynic would the blind spot would be not realizing that the bad assumptions can be remedied and this idea can be developed.
I think a good just to use specific words, that optimism leads to a potentially naive
right.
person.
Yeah.
Where if you're a cynic, you usually come from a realm of realism, which the issue with realism is you don't see opportunity. So like right. The optimist, and then the naivety, well, the negative quality, the positive quality is usually not ambition, but like more willing, more hope, more willing drive because you have hope. Whereas the realism is the negative quality. The realism that comes with cynicism, the negative quality of that is, no hope.
But so realism, is that just the acknowledgement of like what the facts are and not necessarily an outlook on those said facts? Because like a cynic would be like, well, everything's broken and we can't do anything to fix it, right? Whereas a realist would be, well, here's the things that are broken, right? And then an optimist would be, here's the things that are broken and we can fix them all.
I think realists deal with probability. So
Right.
they recognize that it's broken, much like a cynic. They will just generally weigh towards the probability of that broken thing changing.
So they're less risky, maybe.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, you can see that.
This kind of leads into something that interests me about the two perspectives, and that's that. Just going off of what you were just saying, Tyler, that there's a naivety associated with optimism, and I think conversely, there's or contrapositively, there's a sophistication associated with cynicism. It's like if you're cynical by default, then you're never going to look the fool, right? You're never going to like buy into an idea that's not going to work.
But will you buy into any idea? That's
Exactly,
that's
right.
the extreme, right?
Unless it's like a sure thing.
Yeah, it seems to me as
Right.
though like a cynic and an optimist have different beliefs in whether or not something's ever going to happen, right? Like, so a cynic is always going to tend to be, well, whatever you're telling me isn't going to happen. You know, you're promising me like $10 an hour, it's not going to happen. Something like that. That would be the cynic's approach. Whereas like an optimist would always be like, yeah, I'm going to get that $10 or whatever, right? So it's kind of like you might be naive, but at some level, it's good to have that faith and that drive, because so in some way it's kind of like strengthening, because you're using, like, unless you're being taken advantage of, obviously, but
That's the risk.
Yeah, that's the definite risk. But like, so long as you're kind of taking care of yourself, I think being optimistic is a much better approach, because at least you're keeping that hope. But it is important to be skeptical rather than cynical, because cynicism to me is literally negativity, whereas skepticism is don't believe in just whatever people are going to tell you.
It's constant critique.
Yeah. So I think it's cynics might be more skeptical, but they also apply a very negative approach to how they view reality. Whereas I think optimists they can be skeptical, but they're always kind of like, it's going to come through, you know, like I'm going to win the lottery one day kind of thing.
Right. There seems to be, as skepticism is sort of an analog to cynicism, there's seems to be, to optimism, there's open-mindedness, maybe. So like the optimist is more open-minded, would you say?
More open-minded to like the idea that things are going to work.
Yeah.
Yeah, like if I'm thinking back to like that election that we just the voting referendum, more optimists are more likely to say that this referendum will have a positive impact, whereas it's not a cynic, a cynic or a skeptic will more likely to critique it, and a cynic will be more likely to say there's no way to work.
Yeah, it's always bad. No matter what happens, it's always going to be bad. That's my kind of cynicism is very it's self-defeating. I think that would be a huge critique I would have, because if someone's cynical of everything, I think that's very demotivating just as a personal philosophy. Skepticism isn't necessarily, because that's an acknowledgement of reality, but cynicism is just applying a negative filter, a dark blue filter to what you view reality to be.